No one saw her coming until it was too late. Francesca Rossi, the quiet shadow who polished silver and changed linens, whose existence registered in the Vitali mansion somewhere between furniture and ghost, suddenly materialized in the center of the ballroom like an apparition given flesh. Her plain black uniform stood stark against the sea of designer gowns and tuxedos as she cut through the crowd with the determined grace of someone who had calculated the cost of what she was about to do and found her life a price worth paying. Around her, 300 of Italy's most dangerous criminals and their glittering wives fell silent, champagne flutes frozen mid-toast, as this servant girl walked directly toward Dante Vitali, the most feared mafia boss in Milan, and did what no one in 20 years had dared to do. She touched him without permission. She pressed her trembling hands against the lapels of his custom Brioni suit, rose to her tiptoes, and kissed him full on the mouth, mere inches from where his new fiancée stood in speechless horror. Wait, Happy New Year to you. Are you new to this channel? Hit the subscribe button and also smash the like button. Let's continue. The kiss lasted barely 3 seconds, just long enough for Francesca to whisper urgently against his lips, "Don't drink the champagne. Your brother poisoned it. Your fiancé is working with him." When she pulled away, the entire ballroom held its collective breath, awaiting the inevitable explosion of violence that followed any violation of Dante Vitali's legendary boundaries. 300 witnesses watched as the most powerful man in Milan's underworld stared at the maid with an expression of cold, calculating fury. What no one could see, what no one would know, was that beneath that mask of rage, Dante's mind had instantly shifted into the tactical precision that had kept him alive through 2 decades of attempts on his life. The information whispered against his lips wasn't just an accusation. It was a puzzle piece that aligned with subtle inconsistencies he'd observed over recent weeks. His brother's sudden interest in wedding details, his fiancée's uncharacteristic insistence on traditional toasting ceremonies, the strange tension he'd sensed but couldn't identify. But Dante Vitali hadn't survived this long by revealing his hand too early. "How dare you?" he said, his voice carrying the lethal quietness that made even hardened killers step back. His expression betrayed no hint that her warning had registered. Antonio, his consigliere, materialized instantly at his side, face grim with anticipation of the order to come. "Take this person to the East Wing holding room," Dante instructed, deliberately avoiding any acknowledgement of Francesca's gender or humanity. "Secure her there until I decide how to address this insult." The collective gasp that rippled through the ballroom held notes of both relief and disappointment. The gathered criminal elite had expected immediate, bloody retribution, not the cold, calculated postponement of punishment. Restraint from Dante Vitali was almost more terrifying than his rage. 2 security men seized Francesca roughly by the arms. She didn't resist, though her eyes never left Dante's face, searching for some indication that he'd heard her warning. She found none. His features remained an impenetrable mask as he turned away from her, dismissing her existence as completely as if she'd already been removed from the world. "My apologies for the interruption," he addressed his guests with a smooth charm that made him as effective in boardrooms as he was in criminal enterprises. "The help these days, so difficult to find staff who understand appropriate boundaries." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. As Francesca was dragged from the ballroom, Dante turned to his fiancée, Sofia Ricci, whose perfect features had arranged themselves into an expression of appropriate outrage. "Such vulgarity," she declared, her voice carrying just the right note of aristocratic disdain. "Especially on our special night." "Indeed," Dante agreed, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. though we shouldn't allow one disturbed servant to disrupt our celebration. Shall we continue with the toast? Across the room, Dante's brother Marco stepped forward, champagne bottle in hand. Allow me, brother. I selected this vintage specifically for the occasion. To anyone watching, Dante appeared completely at ease as Marco approached, pouring the pale golden liquid into a single crystal flute, the special glass reserved for the head of the Vitali family. Tradition dictated that Dante would drink first, blessing the engagement before others joined the celebration. Marco handed him the glass with a smile that, to most observers, appeared genuinely affectionate. Only someone who had grown up studying every nuance of Marco's expressions, as Dante had, would notice the slight tightening around his eyes, the barely perceptible tension in his shoulders. Dante accepted the glass, raising it in a salute to his guests. To family, he said, the irony of his chosen toast lost on everyone but himself. The bonds that define us and sometimes destroy us. A murmur of appreciation rippled through the crowd, who found the sentiment appropriately dramatic for the occasion. Sophia stepped closer to Dante, her hand possessively on his arm as he raised the glass to his lips. At the precise moment the crystal touched his mouth, Dante's free hand shot out with snake-like speed, gripping Marco's wrist with crushing force. Perhaps my brother would like to join me in this toast, he said, his voice carrying clearly across the now silent ballroom. After all, he selected this special vintage himself. Marco's face drained of color. Dante, don't be absurd. Tradition dictates. I insist, Dante interrupted, his smile now openly dangerous as he forced the champagne flute toward his brother's lips. Drink. Stop this, Sophia hissed, her perfect composure cracking. You're making a scene. Dante's gaze never left his brother's face. If there's nothing to fear from this champagne, why does my fiancé seem so concerned about you drinking it, Marco? The question hung in the air between them, the culmination of Dante's calculated performance. He had heard Francesca's warning. He had processed it, evaluated it against existing suspicions, and created this moment of confrontation on his own terms. Marco's eyes darted toward the exit, calculating escape routes even as Dante's security team moved to block them. This is ridiculous, he protested, struggling against his brother's iron grip. You're embarrassing yourself based on the ramblings of a servant girl. Am I? Dante released Marco's wrist only to grab the back of his neck, forcing him closer to the champagne. Then prove me wrong. Drink. When Marco still resisted, Dante shifted his gaze to Sophia. Perhaps my bride would prefer to demonstrate her confidence in this election. I don't have to prove anything to you, she spat, abandoning all pretense of affection. The confirmation Dante needed was written in their refusal, in the fear now openly displayed on both their faces. He hurled the champagne flute against the marble floor, the crystal shattering in a spray of potentially lethal liquid. Brutus, Dante commanded, and the massive cane corso that had been lounging beneath his side table immediately approached. Dante pointed to the spilled champagne. Smell. The dog lowered its head, sniffed once, then backed away with a low growl, hackles rising, trained since puppyhood to recognize the scent of common poisons. The reaction triggered instant chaos. Marco lunged for a weapon concealed beneath his jacket, but Dante was faster. His fist connected with his brother's jaw with a sickening crack, sending him sprawling across the marble floor. Sophia screamed, backing away as security personnel swarmed the room, separating allies from enemies as years of carefully maintained peace shattered in an instant. Secure them both, Dante ordered, his voice cutting through the pandemonium with practiced authority. "And bring the maid to my study, unharmed." As gunfire erupted from the far corner of the ballroom. Apparently some of the Ricci family had come prepared for complications. Dante moved with the calm precision of a man who had anticipated violence. He drew his own weapon, a custom Beretta that rarely left his side, and dispatched two would-be assassins with clinical efficiency before they could reach him. The ensuing battle lasted less than 5 minutes. The Vitali security forces, loyal and well-trained, quickly subdued the limited resistance. Marco and Sofia were restrained, their expressions shifting from failed conspiracy to the dawning realization of what awaited them. 3 hours later, after the guests had been escorted out, the wounded attended to, and the immediate security threats neutralized, Dante sat behind the massive desk in his private study. The room smelled faintly of leather and sandalwood, the only light coming from a single lamp that cast dramatic shadows across his angular features. When the door opened, Francesca entered with her head held high despite her disheveled appearance. Her lip was split where one of the guards had struck her uniform rumpled from rough handling, but her eyes remained clear and direct as they met Dante's across the expanse of his desk. "You heard me," she said without preamble. Not a question, but a statement of fact. "I heard you," he confirmed, studying her with renewed interest, though I needed confirmation before acting. Evidence rather than accusations. "And now you have it," she stated, maintaining the same quiet dignity that had carried her across the ballroom hours earlier. "Now I have it," he agreed, along with a dead cousin, 3 injured security personnel, and the rather significant inconvenience of dismantling an engagement arranged to strengthen business alliances. If he expected apology or regret, he received neither. Francesca simply stood before him, accepting his assessment without flinching. "How did you know?" he asked, genuine curiosity beneath the question. "About the poison, about my brother's involvement. I overheard them," she answered simply. 3 days ago, in the East Wing study. Your brother and Miss Ricci. They didn't know I was changing the linens in the adjoining room. And you waited until tonight to warn me?" A dangerous edge crept into his tone. "I tried before," she said, a hint of frustration breaking through her careful composure. "I left a note in your study yesterday, but Mr. Marco was there when you found it. He intercepted it, destroyed it. I tried to speak with Mr. Antonio this morning, but was told he was unavailable. Then I saw them switching the champagne bottles just before the toast, and she faltered, the full recklessness of her actions finally hitting her. I couldn't think of any other way to ensure you heard me, that you would listen." Dante leaned back in his chair, reassessing everything he thought he knew about this woman who had been invisible in his household for years. "You risked your life to warn me." "Yes." "Why?" The directness of the question seemed to catch her off guard. She had clearly anticipated interrogation, perhaps punishment, but not this fundamental inquiry into her motivations. "It was the right thing to do," she offered, though something in her expression suggested the explanation was incomplete. "The right thing," Dante repeated, unconvinced. "In my experience, Miss Rossi, people rarely risk their lives for abstract moral principles. They act out of self-interest, fear, or—" He paused, studying her more intently. Personal attachment. Color bloomed across her cheeks, confirming his suspicion before she could formulate a response. "I owe you my life," he continued, rising from his desk to approach her directly. "In my world, such debts must be acknowledged. So tell me, what would you have in return for this service?" This close, he could see the faint dusting of freckles across her nose, the small scar near her right eyebrow, details he had never noticed in 4 years of her near-invisible presence in his home. She was not conventionally beautiful, Not like Sophia with her model-perfect features, but there was something compelling in her directness, in the intelligence that shone behind her eyes. Francesca met his gaze steadily, something shifting in her expression as she made some internal decision. "Your heart," she said simply. For perhaps the first time in 2 decades, Dante Vitale was genuinely surprised. "Excuse me." "Your heart," she repeated, her voice stronger now, shedding the careful subservience that had defined their previous interactions. "I've been in love with you for 3 years, 7 months, and 14 days. Since the afternoon I saw you in the garden, teaching your nephew how to play chess. You were patient with him, kind in a way no one ever speaks of. I saw the man beneath the monster everyone fears." The confession hung between them, breathtaking in its audacity. Any other person who dared speak to him with such familiar presumption would have been removed from his presence immediately. "You understand what you're asking," he said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "The complications, the danger, the scrutiny that comes with proximity to me. I understand completely," she replied with surprising certainty. "I've lived in your world for 4 years, invisible but observing everything. I know exactly what I'm asking for." Dante circled her slowly, assessing her from all angles as he would an unexpected tactical advantage in battle. "And if I decline this unusual request, then I ask only for safe passage from Italy," she said without hesitation. "I've served the Vitale household faithfully despite tonight's disruption. I believe that earns me at least the right to leave alive." A smile ghosted across his features, the first genuine one she had witnessed in 4 years of careful observation. "You negotiate with the confidence of someone in a position of power, Miss Rossi." "Information is power," she replied simply. "And I have considerable information about the internal workings of your organization." The implied threat would have earned most people a swift execution. From her, it drew something closer to respect. "So I find myself with limited options," Dante observed, completing his circle to stand before her once more. "Grant your request for my heart." The words sounded foreign on his tongue. "Or risk you taking your knowledge elsewhere." "I would never betray you," she said with such fierce conviction that he found himself inclined to believe her. "Even if you send me away." Dante reached out, his fingers grazing the split in her lip with surprising gentleness. Such loyalty deserves reward rather than exile. Hope flickered in her eyes, quickly tempered by caution. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he replied, his hand moving to cup her cheek in a gesture far more intimate than any he had shared with his now former fiancée, "that I find myself in need of someone I can trust absolutely. Recent events have made clear how few such people exist in my life." Francesca remained perfectly still beneath his touch, hardly daring to breathe as the impossible seemed to materialize before her. "And you believe that person could be me? You've already demonstrated a willingness to risk everything to protect me," he said, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone. "What greater loyalty could I ask for?" Before she could respond, the study door opened as Antonio entered, his expression grim. "Boss, we've secured Marco and the Ricci woman in the basement. They're ready for questioning whenever you are." Dante's hand dropped from Francesca's face, his expression shifting back to the cold mask of authority his enemies and allies alike had learned to fear. "Prepare the necessary equipment. I'll be down shortly." As Antonio withdrew, closing the door behind him, Dante turned back to Francesca. "We have unfinished business to attend to tonight. Traitors to question. Alliances to recalibrate. A challenge to my power to address with the ruthless efficiency expected of me." She nodded, understanding immediately the violence implied in his carefully measured words. "Of course." But afterward, he continued, something new entering his expression. Not softness exactly, but a different kind of intensity than his usual cold calculation. We will revisit this conversation. This request from my heart, as you put it. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even a promise of affection. But from Dante Vitali, the acknowledgement of possibility was itself extraordinary. A door opened where walls had stood for 20 years. Until then, he said, his voice regaining its customary authority, you will be moved to secure quarters in the family wing. Antonio will ensure your comfort and safety while I deal with tonight's loose ends. As he escorted her to the door, his hand rested briefly at the small of her back, a gesture that might appear insignificant to anyone else, but represented a seismic shift in their dynamic. The untouchable Mafia Boss, allowing contact initiated by his own choice rather than necessity. Francesca, he said as she stepped into the hallway where Antonio waited. Her name in his mouth sent an electric current down her spine. Thank you for saving my life tonight. With those simple words, the first genuine gratitude she had heard from him in 4 years of service. He closed the door, returning to the brutal business of maintaining his empire through whatever means necessary. And Francesca Rossi, who had entered the ballroom as invisible help and was leaving as something else entirely, something not yet defined but undeniably transformed by a single, desperate kiss, followed Antonio toward her new quarters, toward a future suddenly, dangerously possible with the man everyone feared but only she had truly seen. Thank you for watching up till now. Subscribe now and smash that like button. You don't want you to miss the next part. It's about to get really hot. Stay tuned.